This morning, an alarm pulled you out of sleep. You checked your phone before your feet touched the floor. You rushed through breakfast or skipped it entirely, and you spent the next 8, 9, maybe 10 hours working. Tonight you will collapse on a couch, exhausted, and call that free time. You assume this is normal. You assume it has to be this way because life has always been a grind, and your ancestors surely had it worse. But the real answer is far stranger. Your ancestors may have worked less than you do. A lot less. And what they did with the rest of their day might change how you think about your own. Picture a human being 70,000 years ago. No farms, no cities, no bosses. Just a small band of people moving through a landscape they knew the way you know your own street. What does their day actually look like? For most of the last century, scientists assumed the answer was misery, constant hunger, endless searching, a brutal race against starvation that consumed every waking hour. The logic felt airtight. No supermarkets, no storage, no safety net. Surely survival was a full-time job. Then someone actually checked. In the 1960s, a Canadian anthropologist named Richard Lee went to live with the Jew/Hwanzi people of the Kalahari Desert in one of the harshest environments on Earth. These were hunter-gatherers living much as humans had for tens of thousands of years. Lee did something almost no one had bothered to do before. He followed them around with a notebook and a stopwatch, and he recorded exactly how they spent their time. Hour by hour, day by day. The numbers stunned him. Adults spent roughly 17 hours a week actually acquiring food. Add in tool-making, cooking, and chores around camp, and the total came to around 40 hours. Not per person, per day. Per week. In a desert, during a drought. Think about what that means. People with no technology beyond wood, stone, and fiber were covering all of their needs in less time than the average modern employee spends covering rent. And they were not scraping by. Lee found their diet was varied and nutritious, over 2,000 calories a day, rich in protein, and built from more than 100 different plant and animal species. When he asked one man why his people had never bothered to plant crops like their neighbors, the answer became famous. "Why should we plant," the man said, "when there are so many mongongo nuts in the world?" That single study detonated inside anthropology. In 1966, at a landmark conference on hunter-gatherers, the anthropologist Marshall Solins gathered this evidence and made a claim that still sounds like a provocation. Hunter-gatherers, he argued, were the original affluent society, not because they had a lot, because they wanted little and could satisfy those wants with ease. Affluence, Solins pointed out, has two roads. You can produce more, or you can desire less. Your ancestors took the second road, and it left them with something you are chronically starved of: time. So what did they do with it? This is where the story gets interesting because the honest answer is not what you would expect. They did not spend their free hours improving themselves. They did not optimize. They rested. They napped through the heat of the afternoon. They played games, told jokes, flirted, argued, and wandered over to visit relatives in neighboring camps. Above all, they talked. The anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent decades recording Yu-Hwanzi conversations, and she noticed a strange pattern. Daytime talk was practical and often sharp. Complaints, plans, gossip, disputes over meat. But at night, around the fire, everything changed. More than 80% of firelight conversation turned to stories. Tales of ancestors, of distant relatives, of strange events and mythical beings. The fire seemed to open a different room in the human mind. Does that sound familiar? It should. Gossip by day, stories and shows by night. Your scrolling and your streaming are not modern inventions. They are ancient appetites wearing new clothes. The evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar has argued that language itself evolved largely for this social bookkeeping, as a kind of verbal grooming that let humans maintain bonds in groups too large for one-on-one attention. In other words, chatting was never a waste of time. Chatting was the job. The band that talked together stayed together, and the band that stayed together survived. But wait, if food only took a few hours a day, was the rest really leisure? Not exactly, and this is an important correction. Ancient life had no clean line between work and rest. A walk to gather nuts was also a social visit, a scouting trip, and a chance to teach children which plants heal and which kill. Toolmaking happened in conversation, hands busy, mouths busier. Childcare was spread across the whole camp, so no single mother carried the load alone. There were no commutes, no inboxes, and crucially, no clocks. Tasks expanded and contracted with need, not with schedules. Anthropologist James Sussman, who lived with the Jew Huanzi for nearly 30 years, puts it simply. They worked to live. They did not live to work. The idea that time is money, that an idle hour is a wasted one, would have struck them as a kind of madness. And their bodies tell the same story. You might assume hunter-gatherers burned enormous amounts of energy compared to you, chained to your desk. The evolutionary anthropologist Herman Poncer tested this directly with the Hadza people of Tanzania using a method called doubly labeled water, a technique that tracks energy use with chemical precision. The result was one of the strangest findings in modern human biology. Hadza adults, walking miles every day, climbing trees, digging for tubers, burned roughly the same number of total calories as sedentary office workers in Europe and America. The human body, it turns out, adjusts. It budgets. Your ancestors moved constantly but gently, a rhythm of walking, squatting, carrying, resting. Never the frantic burst of a spin class, never the dead stillness of a 9-hour sit. Even their sleep will surprise you. You have probably heard that modern life ruined sleep and that ancient humans slumbered 10 pure hours under the stars. The sleep scientist Jerome Siegel tested that too, fitting hunter-gatherers in Tanzania, Namibia, and Bolivia with activity monitors. They slept about 6.5 hours a night. Less than you have been told you need. But here is the difference. They almost never suffered from insomnia. Some of the groups had no word for it. They fell asleep as temperatures dropped, woke with the light, napped when tired, and never once lay awake at 3 in the morning rehearsing tomorrow's meeting. Their sleep was shorter, but it was clean. Yours is longer and haunted. So when did everything change? Ask yourself what invention finally forced humans to work from dawn to dusk. It was not the factory, it was the farm. Around 12,000 years ago, humans began domesticating plants and animals, and the deal looked good on paper. More food, more security, more people. But archaeology reveals the fine print. Early farmers worked far longer hours than the foragers they replaced. Their skeletons shrank by several inches, their teeth rotted. Their joints wore down under repetitive strain, and new diseases jumped from livestock into their crowded villages. Studies of skeletal remains show that health, by almost every measure, declined when humans settled down. The scientist Jared Diamond went so far as to call agriculture the worst mistake in the history of the human race. That is surely too dramatic. Farming built everything you love, from medicine to music to the device you are watching this on. But it also built something else. Scarcity that could be stored, wealth that could be hoarded, and for the first time, days that belonged to someone other than you. Because here is the thing about a field of wheat. It does not care that you are tired. Grain can be counted, stockpiled, taxed, and stolen, so someone had to guard it, someone had to manage it, and someone had to work it. Hierarchy grew from the granary. The farmer's anxiety, the fear that no matter how much you have, next season could take it away, is the seed of an emotion you know intimately. The feeling that you are always behind, that there is never enough, that you cannot stop. Now look at your own day again. The 40-hour week you consider natural is barely a century old, won by exhausted factory workers in the 1920s. In 1930, the economist John Maynard Keynes predicted that by now, your generation, technology would have shrunk the working week to 15 hours. He believed the great challenge of your era would be filling your abundant leisure. On productivity, he was right. A single modern worker produces more than a dozen workers of his time. So where did your 15-hour week go? It vanished into the same trap the first farmers fell into. Every gain in efficiency was converted not into time, but into more output, more consumption, more wants. Solons named the mechanism decades ago. There are two roads to affluence, and your civilization only ever takes one. None of this means the past was paradise. Your ancestors buried half their children. A broken leg could be a death sentence, an infected tooth a slow catastrophe. Violence was real, droughts were real, and no sane person would trade modern medicine for a digging stick. You are not being asked to romanticize the Stone Age. You are being asked to notice something specific. For roughly 95% of human history, your species worked a few focused hours, moved gently through the day, shared food without keeping score, and spent long evenings in firelight doing nothing more productive than telling stories. That is the environment your brain was tuned for. That is the baseline your body still expects. The restlessness you feel at a desk, the deep satisfaction of cooking for friends, the way conversation flows differently after dark. None of that is random. It is memory, not your memory. Your species' memory. The busyness you wear like a badge is not human nature. It is a habit, and it is younger than the pyramids. The next time someone tells you that relentless work is simply what humans do, you now know the truth is closer to the opposite. Humans are the animal that mastered the art of enough. You come from a long line of people who knew when to stop. So tonight, when you finally put the day down, notice what you reach for. A meal shared with someone, a story on a screen, a voice you love, talking about nothing in particular. That is not laziness, and it is not wasted time. That is the oldest human schedule reasserting itself. Tomorrow morning, the alarm will pull you out of sleep again into a day your ancestors would not recognize. But the part of you that resists it, the part that just wants to sit by the fire and talk until the stars come out, that part is 70,000 years old, and it was never wrong.